Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Band Podcast. We came live much more quickly than I thought we were going to. We're still doing behind the scenes chatter, but I'm your host of the Band Podcast. And before we dive into it, we have our contractually obligated intro music.
Yep.
Amazing little audiovisual masterpiece you just witnessed assures you, gentle viewers, that this is a high quality podcast. Only the finest geeky conversation for your podcast listening pleasure. Sorry, I can't talk all of a sudden. And today we are talking about Cyberpunk with Mr. Paul and Chris Vermeren. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
But before we dive in, Mr. Owen Casey Stevens is here, and Owen, congratulations! You have recently beat cancer. So
yep, I just got my double down testing, both a biopsy and an MRI, that say that I am right now officially cancer free. So,
congratulations! That is awesome.
Thank you. And it took a lot of help from a lot of people, and it left a lot of bills, which I am also going to try to cover with a lot of help from a lot of people. So Mike is very kindly showing you the tiny URL /Owen Bundle 2, which 26 publishers put together more than $1,200 worth of RPG products for $30. So go check it out.
Yeah, and I can't go through everything, but we got Evil Genius Games, Adventure of Week Games, Ad Infinitum, our friend Steve Kenson, just so many. So it's a huge value. A lot of games in your library, and it's for a great cause, because it's expensive to have cancer in America these days. So they got Skull Island from Evil Genius.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Skull Island. I did the outline for that adventure.
Yeah, who doesn't like giant monkeys? No one. Bolsheviks. Who doesn't like giant monkeys, ladies and gentlemen? You should check this out one more time for the people in the cheap seats. tinyurl.com/Owen Bundle 2. Running for, I'm guessing, a week or two. Do we have a date?
I believe the plan is to run it through the end of next month.
Okay. So it's a limited time offer, folks. So jump on it now. It's for a good cause. There's a lot of cool games. So, anything else we want to say on that subject before we pivot to Cyberpunk?
I think that more than covers it.
Okay, cool. So let me stop sharing. So Cyberpunk, it's a new genre, right? It's only been out around, say, maybe since Neuromancer, which is the cover behind me, by William Gibson in the 80s. I always thought of it as kind of a variation of the noir genre. And I would go ahead and say that probably William Gibson is maybe the only author I've really read who has done Cyberpunk that I've liked. And I haven't seen, if we're not counting The Matrix, I don't know if we should. I don't know if I've seen any good Cyberpunk in the big screen. Owen, let's start with you, and we'll go around the horn. What is your favorite or least favorite Cyberpunk media, and do you have any thoughts on the genre?
There's a lot of Cyberpunk anime that I think is quite good, that can often get into some of the important Cyberpunk questions. What does it mean to be human? How much of your humanity can you swap out and still be human? What happens when you have intelligences that legitimately aren't intelligent or aren't human but are still sapient and sentient? I think Ghost in the Shell is an excellent example of something that is solidly cyberpunk, and here I mean the original manga and anime. That doesn't mean that the American language film wasn't cyberpunk, it just wasn't as good. Appleseed is another example that I got onto super early that has a lot of things that people think of as cyberpunk frequently miss out on. It's interesting because cyberpunk sort of came into being before the internet, or at least before the way we use the internet now. And so there's a great deal of early cyberpunk work that sort of already feels dated despite being in the future. And yet now we're getting to a point where things like AI and misinformation and viruses begin to make me wonder if the real world isn't going to go back to a place where you kind of don't use the internet for information or knowledge or trusted communications, you're going to have to go back to the way Cyberpunk worked early on, where these things are theoretically that's out there, but it's sort of like walking through the sewer in order to get downtown, right? I see Chris and Paul waving, and we will absolutely get to them.
Yeah, if you like that, what Owen just said, you may like Terminal State, but yeah.
So there's definitely some there, but so for me, the early Cyberpunk anime is sort of in many cases my favorite, and I think some of the most solidly Cyberpunk. One of the things that I find very interesting, you mentioned that Cyberpunk kind of feels noir to you. Cyberpunk often feels like a Western to me. You can take almost any good Western plot and turn it into Cyberpunk, right? And going back, right? Therefore, you can, by the same token, take almost any samurai movie plot and turn it into good Cyberpunk. So, if you want to do Magnificent Seven or Seven Samurai as, you know, seven keyboard cowboys or seven cyborgs. In fact, there was a cyborg anime, Cyberpunk Seven Samurai. All those plots work together. And I think part of it is because Cyberpunk proposes this reality where individuals kind of aren't seen as important by the vast, powerful grinding machines, and yet at any given moment might have the power or even the duty to try and make a difference in a specific moment. And that is very much like the Old West or the samurai films, where one person's journey as a person could be important. And you're going to have lots of opportunities to do things that are morally questionable. And there are going to be questions as to, should I be a samurai or should I be a regular human being? Should I be true to the cowboy Western way? Or should I try to save these people even though their way of life is doomed and civilization is going to roll over us? So I think there are a lot of interesting things that feel like Cyberpunk, despite not necessarily having a lot of the elements of Cyberpunk. And rather than talk for the rest of the time, I will let you rotate on to someone else.
You are muted.
You're muted there, Mike.
No, sorry, I was. Hey, Jacob, favorite or least favorite Cyberpunk media?
Oh my goodness, Cyberpunk's been with me since I was really young. My first introduction with Cyberpunk as a very young man was Max Headroom.
Ah.
And I dare to say that was probably a lot of people's introduction in general, because it really has to be one of the first mainstream series that delved into the genre, especially in the United States. And it kind of stuck with me because of my love, like Owen, my love of anime, because the anime genre clung to Cyberpunk as a genre. It was just so cool and had so many things to be done with it. And they could tell a lot of stories in it. You know, we're talking, Bubblegum Crisis, 80 Tank Police, both of which take place in the same universe, are technically superhero shows. Mm-hmm. They just happen to be cyberpunk, and so I would watch things like that all the time. But as for favorite show, it's a lot of people might pivot to Johnny Mnemonic because it's the one that's probably known the most. But my favorite cyberpunk movie and or show, I'm going to have to go with the Hotel Artemis as my favorite movie.
That was good.
And I have just recently started watching, and I only have 2 episodes left, of The Peripheral.
Mm-hmm. Haven't even heard of this. What's The Peripheral?
The later Gibson books.
Mm-hmm. It is based on a Gibson book, but it was an Amazon Prime series it is thoroughly cyberpunk, and it is pretty amazing. Unfortunately, it died an early death because of the writer's strike. It had season 1, and then the writer's strike happened, which pretty much nixed any more
It died an early death because we're not allowed to have nice things.
Yeah, yeah. But I like I said, I've been watching it. I only have 2 episodes left, and it is just such cyberpunk candy to my senses. I was hooked on episode 1.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna veer over to Paul. Paul, you're next, sir.
Okay. Owen and Jacob have both mentioned anime. I'm also an anime guy, though I'm more into older anime and not as much interested in a lot of the newer stuff because I'm just like that. I want to mention, like, these are like honorable mention things. They're not exactly good, but they are like really strong encapsulations of like the cyberpunk cliches, and those are Cyber City 080-808 and Goku Midnight Eye. They're both very cheesy. They're very macho. They're very over the top. They're very dated. Honestly, they're very much of the 80s. That everything's neoned out. Everybody's got big hair and shoulder pads. But if you want to see those cliches come to life, like when the genre really started like calcifying, kind of become a parody of itself, and that's what we're trying to move away from. But if you want to see that stuff on the screen, Yoshiaki Kawajiri's cyberpunk stuff is highly recommended. If you want to see like a cheesy cyberpunk role-playing game brought to the big screen, Nemesis by Albert Pyun is a horrible movie, but it's also a ridiculously entertaining and stupid movie. if anybody who's looked at the stuff that I make would probably not be surprised that I like that. But to sum up and give Chris the chance to talk about the genre that he really loves, my favorite cyberpunk release on the big screen is probably RoboCop. It's got a lot of the satirical edge that I like to find in cyberpunk stuff. When I saw it as a kid, I didn't get it. Even when I saw it in my 20s, I thought it was stupid. It took me until maybe, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago to like actually figure out, get the joke and be like, oh, okay. It is very satirical. It's very ridiculous. That's kind of what Verhoeven did, at least at the time. So I'm a big fan of those. I want to say one more thing, though, which is there are movies that aren't technically cyberpunk that have some elements to them that I think are kind of like forerunners of it. And one that I don't really hear people talk very much about that I think is actually a pretty cool movie is the 1970s Rollerball with James Caan, which is a vision of a world that's in economic collapse and environmental collapse, and that's literally dominated by 4 or 5 corporations. A lot of what would become cyberpunk is in that movie. The only thing it doesn't have is, cyberspace or cybernetics, but everything else that you need for a cyberpunk kind of satirical commentary is there. So, yeah.
Let me interject really quick. When he says RoboCop, he means the 1980s RoboCop, like all right-thinking, proper people. But in case you are not a gray beard, and you think we mean the RoboCop of 2014, the RoboCop of 2014, I think if you like cyberpunk, is worth watching and analyzing.
It's not terrible
stuff from. It's got some good cyberpunk stuff in it. It's just not nearly as good a movie. For one of the reasons it's not as good a movie is it knows that it's playing against one of the all-time classics, and so it makes decisions because of the previous movie.
It doesn't stand
Rollerball,
alone.
Again, you got to specify you mean the 1970s Rollerball, because there was a horrible
90s Rollerball.
I will also which literally does its best to take a flamethrower to the entire point of the original Rollerball.
Yes.
Just like Rollerball, if you want to look at some of the early sci-fi that had some of the seeds that became cyberpunk, I think it's worth looking at Soylent Green. It's got some of the very same stuff, and even Logan's Run has some of the what is valued, what are people worth, what's a life, how is society controlled. All of those are some great examples of things that are very helpful to someone who wants to get a feel for cyberpunk. Blade Runner is in many ways sort of not quite properly cyberpunk, but people throw it in quite a bit. But I think socially speaking, I think the setup of a future, Paul's much more on the head by going with Rollerball, and I would throw in the other few I mentioned. Sorry to interrupt. We can now move on.
Don't forget the 1995 classic, The Net, with Sandra Bullock, that I think.
Yeah.
Can we throw the moderator out? Or
the only problem with The Net is that it was already irrelevant by the time it was released.
Yeah.
The Net did not realize how fast society was changing now. If The Net had come out 5 years earlier, people would have been much more impressed with it. But the concept to screen took so long that the idea, I can order pizza without a person ever seeing me, was just, or hearing me, right, without my voice. People look at that now and they're like, yeah, duh, it's called DoorDash.
Right.
So, Chris, we saved the best for last, sir. What's your favorite bit of cyberpunk media?
Blade Runner has been my favorite movie forever. I don't think it's cyberpunk either. It's definitely neo-noir, but it is one of the grandfathers of cyberpunk and has many of the element, megacorps and all that. Doesn't have the punk element at all. So it's not cyberpunk, but it's definitely got the aesthetic that everybody grew off of from that. So Blade Runner is always huge on my list. I could go for days. I literally have 4 pages of inspirations and resources in the back of Terminal State, which we'll be talking about, of movies, comics, video games. It's all cyberpunk or cyberpunk adjacent. So it goes on and on and on and on. But I already said Blade Runner. Going more recent, the newest Dread movie was great. It's also a dungeon crawl, so it's great on top of that as well. So it's just, that's like a role-playing game as a movie. So I love that one. And he didn't take his helmet off, so
yeah, right.
Best Dread film there is.
A lot of the great,
which isn't saying a whole lot.
A lot of the great cyberpunk elements in the most recent Dread movie are directly from the Judge Dredd comic, which has a ton of cyberpunk stuff built into it. As long as you, again, like RoboCop, go into it realizing what it is.
And RoboCop is in a lot of ways a Judge Dredd movie in disguise. Like, I'm pretty sure the people who wrote it read a lot of 2080. So yes.
Interestingly, Chris said that Blade Runner didn't have punk. Blade Runner is punk if you're playing the replicants, right? It is not punk if you are playing the Blade Runner, the person that is part of the authority and hunting it down. But if your point of view becomes the replicant point of view, then very suddenly we were built to serve. We have kicked that purpose. We're doing whatever the fuck we can because we probably don't have long to live. That's the punk element. But of course, in that movie, society is successfully crushing that.
Which is what the next book for the Blade Runner RPG is, by the way. It's Replicant Rebellion. So,
which some people argue it should have been from day one, but I understand why it wasn't. But,
because neither of the movies were that, so they were
right.
So if you take Ridley Scott's, I think he came back and explained that Harrison Ford Decker, this character, was actually a replicant. Does that make it more depressing?
I've never bought that.
Never
view, personally. I don't see it. I think it's after the fact.
That's fair.
I'll tell you who was a secret replicant. Charlize Theron's character from Alien Prometheus.
Okay.
I was thinking earlier today that in a way the Alien universe, if you take out the xenomorphs, it looks a lot like Cyberpunk.
That's because it is. Ridley Scott has come out and said that the Alien franchise and Blade Runner are supposed to take place in the same universe, along with Soldier. Soldiers are replicants.
I think he said ice pirates too, didn't he?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, that and You're the Hunter from the Future actually is also part of it somehow.
And Space Invaders.
Ice Pirates is a great movie, but
you know what else is Cyberpunk, guy? You know what else is Cyberpunk? Terminal State.
Yes, it is.
Hey, what's that? tinyurl.com/terminal state is the Kickstarter that Chris and Paul are running right now. Reading their blurb. Dramatic actor voice. A near future corporate dystopia role-playing game. The cyberpunk future of now, not an 80s retro clone, powered by the Year Zero engine. And you guys are fighting a good fight. You are over 2/3 of the way there, 12 days left to go. So you're in the final round. I'm betting you're gonna make it. And I just backed it, and all the cool kids are backing it. So listeners, go back this Kickstarter. But tell us about this. I'm gonna once again the link tinyurl.com/terminal state. I will share the art. But yeah, folks, go check this out right now. I've been dying to ask somebody on the air. Paul and I talked beforehand, but I'm not super familiar with the Year Zero engine, Chris.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you found appealing about that and why you chose to use that for this project?
Go back a little history. So I decided to use the Year Zero engine. They brought out Mutant Year Zero, was one, I think the first one that came out over here, and I really liked the game. Then they brought out Forbidden Lands was the next Kickstarter, and one of the stretch goals of that, this was way back, it was before Free League's pretty big now. Most people have at least heard of them. They're Forbidden Lands, one of the stretch goals was to make it OGL. And I had always had in my head the idea of turning a magic system into hacking. Like hacking should happen in combat with everybody else. That's always been my problem in Cyberpunk games. Is hacking is somebody off doing some mini game, or it's just hand waved. So I decided I always wanted to do that, so I backed that, thinking of turning it into that. It's morphed a lot since then, partly because, and one of my favorite parts of Year Zero engine, this is where I'm getting to, is every game they bring out, they change the system slightly to fit the game. The core things are there, like their pushing engine is generally relatively the same. They usually have 4 stats. Sometimes there's 12 skills, sometimes there's 16 based, tied to the attributes, but they're fairly consistent in that. It's just they switch things up a lot and have extra little rules that they pick in to fit like they did the Alien game, and they brought in a whole my brain, Paul help me out, but you're
talking about the fear, like the panic system?
Yeah, the panic system. Thank you. All I could think of was horror, and that's from Vossen, is with the similar thing, but it's a horror game. So they add little things that make it work. So it's very modular. So there was all these different games, especially as I was developing this over years, and that's why it's taken years to cover. Every time I have an idea, they bring out something else. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So at one point, this game was really bloated because every cool idea from every YZA game I was trying to fit in. And I'm like, that's a bad idea. So I rethought it. So if I had brought this out along I think I've been developing this 4 years, almost 5 years now.
It's about 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be like version 4 now, because I've rewritten it completely that many times going, okay, it was first just kind of Forbidden Lands modified. Then I made it my own version. And then they brought out T2K and these other games that had other stuff. So I kept modifying it. But now this last version, I looked at everything, tore everything off that I didn't need, and really made it more, there's the core mechanic and a few modifications to make it what Cyberpunk I think should be in the YZE, and throwing out all the extra fluff that it didn't need.
Well, let me ask you, this is a question I ask most people who come on the show. This is a new setting and a familiar genre. If I'm playing your game, what is my what's my guy doing in Terminal State?
Can I jump in here?
Please.
Yep. Go ahead, since you played it.
Yeah, the reason why I'm jumping in is because I've played it, and I didn't create it. So Chris has run a lot of play tests for this over the years. As you mentioned, this game's gone through a lot of different iterations. In that time, I think that we've played a lot of sort of mini campaigns that show off what you can do with the system. In one of the more memorable ones, we were people who were trapped in a shopping mall while there was a huge terrorist attack going on, where terrorists had bombed one of the space elevators, and there was debris falling down on top of the mall as we were trying to escape it. It was pretty cool. We did a campaign where we were your typical cyberpunk biker gang, but we were on an orbital ring that was mostly full of rich people, and we were these poor punk kids like scraping to survive in that in outer space, which is a little bit different from what I think you usually get in Cyberpunk. There was one where we were simply trying to track down a missing child in like this sort of like shantytown community on the outskirts of a mega city. There was a campaign where we were globe-trotting guys who were trying to do a corporate extraction. We were trying to steal somebody from a rival corporation. And the cool part of that one is that we were using the space elevators and going up into the orbital rings and back down to basically kind of like chase this guy around the planet. Like we were almost, not teleporting around, but one of the cool things about the setting is that it has all of this orbital stuff that you can use to basically jump around the world, which you have to do because you can't hack from a long distance as easily as you can in our current world, because kind of like what Owen was talking about, the, forgive my curse words, the enshittification of the internet led to a type of world where everything is basically mesh networks, and people are scared to put the really sensitive stuff online. So you do have to actually go and get it a lot of the time.
One of the character archetypes, there's 8 archetypes and 3 professions for each. One of them is like the courier, because a lot of stuff is delivered by hand now, and a lot of the rich people, all the locks and stuff are not digital anymore. They've gone back to analog, locks, because it's just safer, because you can't hack them. Old tech,
Right.
Is unhackable. All modern tech is hackable by anybody, because that's the other point of Terminal State, is everybody can hack. Everybody's wired. So
everybody's online 24/7 in this world.
Yeah.
So whether they want to be or not, it's just how things work now.
Yeah. You can turn it off, but you don't want to, because then they know you do, and then that's.
I feel like maybe I'm getting off topic, but to answer your question, Mike, your character, whatever you make and whatever the scenario is most likely disadvantaged in some way in Terminal State. You could theoretically be somebody who's like, some sort of corporate bigwig in some way, but you're probably in trouble for something. Characters are generally on the run in Terminal State. There's some sort of like surveillance going on, or there's some sort of pressure from above that you're going to have to worry about. And there are mechanics that build off of that. The more crazy stuff you do, the more likely it is that eventually, CorpSec or other versions of the man are going to come and crack down on you.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are, what that means can depend. But yeah.
That kind of reminds me, just some broad strokes, of the old Doom pool from Marvel.
Yeah. That's a good.
Very...
a lot of YZA games have things like that, and that's a very good comparison. And now I'm going to shut up and let Chris talk about his game.
Yeah. The referee gets an edge pool that's very much like that, and there's also from like inspired by PBTA games. I have a couple. They're an optional thing in the rule book, but there's the game dials would call reference for surveillance or survival. So when you're in the city and doing stuff, and botch a hacking roll, the surveillance level is going to go up, because they're going to know you're trying to do something. If you go outside of because it's kind of a points of light around these terminals that go to the rings, that the orbital rings Paul was mentioning. Outside of that, it's DMZs and just wasteland. And out there, then you do stuff, and if you screw it up or if you're doing things, the survival level goes up. So it's it's harder than it, because many of the YZE games are survival based. So keep into that. It doesn't work needed as much in the city, because you don't have to worry about that stuff. But when you get out of the city, that's when the survival of the normal YZE games can come in more.
Now, for the uninitiated, YZE, that's your guys' company name, right?
Right. No, YZE is Year Zero Engine.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry. Ours is VX2.
Yeah. All right.
Lots of acronyms flying around. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I work in corporate America. I'm up to here with acronyms all day. So. Got to get the ROI for the fuck it.
Yes.
Jacob.
KPIs, ROIs.
Yeah. Yes. Jacob, you had some questions you wanted to ask, I thought.
Well, I was first of all, I was wanted to take a look. As you were flipping through this, I am loving the art aesthetic. As an artist, I'm loving the art aesthetic that you've got here, with its predominantly black illustrations. That one illustration that you have on the cover there, especially with the guy with the really built up cyber arm, is giving me strong Tetsuo the Iron Man vibes. So that's really creepy and cool at the same time. But you've actually kind of already answered this, and what I was going to be asking is this is something I tend to ask in regards to a lot of the superhero RPGs we get, and in this regard it would apply to your Cyberpunk RPG, is what kind of sets this apart from other RPGs in its genre. And as you've already said, it's your characters, no matter what major advantages you have, whether you're a corporate guy or you're cybered up or whatever, you're going to be at some sort of huge disadvantage to start, and that being the element of the play. So
there's a big favor and debt system is a big part of the game. There's money and gear. I didn't want so many Cyberpunk games are just all about gear management or gear porn, or like getting the best this one weapon that just does better than everything else, or getting fully borged out. I didn't want that at all. So if you on the Kickstarter page, there's a yellow page near the bottom that's the weapon, the main modern weapon sections. There's 8. That's it. The basic type of thing. And then there's a whole gear customization system. So you pick a basic ass pistol or a revolver or shotgun, and then you modify from there to make what you want it to be, rather than have, because especially Year Zero engine games, they're not real expansive in terms of the range of things. I'm using the step die system. There's D6, D8, D10, D12. So there's not a whole lot of range to go to on what your weapons can do,
right?
In terms of damage or stats, or there's not a whole.
Yeah, there's not first level characters and 20th level characters. Like it's not like that huge spread you get in some games.
So it's pick this basic thing, make it look like and have some of the abilities you want it to have. So you're customizing what it can do extra, not stat wise. A shotgun's a shotgun. You can do other things that modify that a little bit, but it's going to be a shotgun.
Yeah. Similarly, like a lot of the augments that you can get, which is this game terminology for biomorphic or cybernetic stuff, a lot of it is actually just cosmetic. Like you can describe it however you want. It doesn't really do much for you necessarily, but it's probably going to be necessary because one of the things I like about Terminal State is your augments have locations, and combat has a hit location system, which means that if you get hit in the head, your data link might get messed up, and now you're going to have more trouble hacking, stuff like that. So I like that the idea is not just like, oh, hit locations are cool because it's badass to be like, yeah, shoot the guy in the face, but it also has like a little bit more of a long-term effect on you. It's like, well, you got shot in the face, so now you got to get a new face. Stuff like that.
Yeah, hit location I think makes perfect sense in a Cyberpunk game, because it's like, okay, you get hit in your arm, you lose your arm, well, you're going to have to get a cyber arm. It ties directly. And as Paul said, you can have as much. We talked about this on other things that I've talked to people about. A lot of the games have a mechanic in Cyberpunk games that if you get too much cyber, you get cyber psychosis or whatever.
Yeah,
I do have an augmentation limit in this, that if you start going over it, but it's not like once you start going over it, you're going, you're losing your stats or anything like that. It's just you then have to start rolling things to see if it is affecting you. And it's not one stat; it's based off a physical, your flex, which is your nervous system kind of stat, if you will, your reflexes and things like that, and your cool, so your willpower and things like that. So those two together determine how well you can deal with having so many cybernetics.
Hey, so you're zooming in on concepts and professions.
There you go. There they are.
I'm an old school role player. I apologize. I come from the days when you had to write the numbers on yourself with a wax crayon.
I have those sitting right next to me.
Yeah. So I love the tables.
Yep.
And I zoomed in on this one you guys had. Can you tell me what's going on here?
So character creation is like the first almost third of the book, because it's kind of got a life pathy system built into rolling up your character. And you can always every table you can see at the top says you roll or choose or make up your own on some things depending. But I like where you could randomly roll. I love to random roll characters. It's just my preference. I just like to see what I get. I don't always go in with I want to make this thing, but you can choose most of these things. But so the concept is like your overall character class, and then each one has 3 professions under it, and that's kind of like a specialization from there. That you pick one of those key attributes. So that's the key attribute that's the one you can raise higher than anything else. Usually the cap is the D10, but if your key attribute you could raise up to the top to a D12. Rep is very important in this game. Rep determines your credit level, so you can buy things, and also affects your contacts, which you then can get favors and debts from, which we talked about a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost concept, like in this future, like, yeah, money still exists, but it's really a function of what your reputation is.
Yeah.
So it's really like how big of a deal are you is what determines, your credit in this world.
Yeah,
so I think it's kind
who
of
you are and who you know is more important than anything else, and who knows you.
Okay, so that'd be why I like the idol and the factor.
Yeah, factor is basically your fixery guys. Idols are to call back to Cyberpunk 2020, and that's where your rock star and your movie starry type people in this, which are the facades, because nobody is actually a movie star. It's all AI generated, but they discovered some people need somebody to idolize. So you sell your face to be put in movies, but you don't actually do any of the acting. You're just like a figurehead to go to the events, so people have somebody to go gaga over.
One of the things I like to give Chris a hard time about is that, it's supposed to be the cyberpunk future of now, but there's still rock stars in 2089. And I was like, come on, man. But it's okay. I'll let it.
That's
just
the term.
Yeah, it's just the term. They're not making rock. But yeah.
They might.
Keith Richards will still be around by then, so
Rock and roll will never die, man.
Okay.
Punk rock.
And if I know Gene Simmons, he'll sell the license rights for Kiss robots on his deathbed.
Yeah, Kiss will still be on tour in 2089, I'm sure.
Yeah. They actually did something very cyberpunk. They sold their likeness rights to an outfit who's going to do
so they're actually
CGI generated Kiss avatar shows.
Right, that's literally a class in this game. So yeah. Well, not a class, a profession, but yeah.
I just saw that James Earl Jones signed his voiceover for Darth Vader.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It's concerning. I'm kind of living for the day when they start making movies with the original 3 actors from the first Star Wars. I like to see Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, young and vital, and
they did Mark Hamill already, and
they did. They were
one of the seasons of what
Carrie Fisher and Rogue One, and I just I'd like to see them having some awkward interactions in the back of the Falcon, and Han is making sure not to leave Luke and Leia alone together for too long. So, Hey guys, you want to play Scrabble? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well,
so one of the other things that Chris didn't mention about character creation is that in Terminal State, there's multiple different kinds of humanity. Mm-hmm. There are the humans that we think of, like that you and I are, but there's also fabricants, Neo, and ringers. So you get a little bit of, if you're the type of person that likes picking out a species for your character, you kind of sort of get to do that in Terminal State. So I think that's one of the other things that's a little bit different than a lot of cyberpunk games.
Well, help me out here. So you got regular humans, and then you had about 4 other species you mentioned. Could you tell us the differences? 3 others. Tell us the differences between those.
So fabricants are sapient AI that once they gain sapience are required by law to register their code, and they are put into a nano-organic robotic body, which are non-human looking on purpose, so that
Yeah, not allowed to look.
You can illegally transfer yourself into a humanoid body, but that's then if you get caught, you're in trouble. Neos are similar to like meths from Altered Carbon, in that they're usually rich people or people who are in trouble and need to switch their consciousness into another body, whether it's a different body than their own. Is one option, but usually it's these are cadavers that are biomorphically, re-engineered that you go into, and a lot of times they're genetically modified to be a younger version of yourself, so like a meth. And ringers are clones that were genetically made to as a labor force to build the rings orbital rings we've been talking about, and just recently gained independence and their own citizenship and the rights to their own patent. So
yeah,
they're the kind of like newest form of life.
Oh,
one of the fun
And
things about ringers, I think, is like there's only like 4 models of them. So whatever version of a ringer you are, you have tens of thousands of identical, siblings running around. So they do
Tamora Morrison.
Yeah. So they do a lot of stuff like, a lot of body modification and stuff like that to try to set themselves apart from the 20,000 other people that look exactly like you. So that's one of the things that is really cool about them.
All right. So there's 4 different models. What are the 4 different models of that?
There's security, labor, command, and operations.
Oh.
Because I said they were built as a force to build out the Noir and stuff. So they're very oriented to, kind of like a caste system more than anything else.
They're the people who built the near orbital rings. So yeah, they're kind of like, a little bit replicant-y, sometimes, it helps to kind of like wear your influences on your sleeve so people know what they're dealing with when they make some.
Yeah, those are definitely the biggest influence from Blade Runner. There is the ringers.
That's cool. Yeah, this sounds very interesting. Just one more time for listeners and viewers. tinyurl.com/terminal state. And right now, if you're watching us, that is scrolling across the bottom of the screen right beneath Jacob and Owen's face. Owen, you've been quiet for a minute, sir. Do you have any thoughts, questions?
Just one. Yeah, I've been quiet because if I'm not quiet, then the guests don't get to say anything. So you all were specifically talking about like the lack of punk making Blade Runner not really cyberpunk. So what do you see as the punk element of Terminal State? What is it that is in there in what you intend for people to do that you would describe as a punk attitude, aesthetic universe?
Well, Paul hinted at, and generally even if you're, because there's also 6 social status, which we didn't talk about, and we don't have time to get into. No matter your social status, even if you're a corp, which is an option, you're probably have gotten into something or you just want to subvert your, win into the system to be, fight the system from within type of person is even how they're written up. But the goal of the game is you're either the downtrodden or you're fighting the system. You're not part of the system. The goal is to take down the hypercorps. They run everything. There are no governments. The hypercorporations run everything. There's a whole system that they use to control everything, and they live up in the Noir most of the time, the really rich ones, and control everything from there, and don't even so it's kind of got that's a little bit of a Battle Angel Alita influence there, where it's you got these rings up there that you can go to, but unlike Battle Angel, but nobody else lives there, but the really rich you can't afford to. So they're more you go there to travel
on the top floor concept.
Yeah. Yep. So you're fighting the system. Humans are written up their human write-up is all about that. Ringers, we're a labor force and obviously are not want to fight that. Fabricants are, just gaining their independence, from and can't be fully independent because they have to be in they forced into these bodies once they gain their sapience. So it's a lot of stuff, not all spelled out like, yes, we're, but the hints of everything of what my intent. I also don't want to make it my intent of the game. It's a cyberpunk setting. With the rule set. You can make it what you want, but here's the rule. world, but my intent, the way we've all played it, is you're always fighting the system, and that's kind of subtext in everything that's in there. I think that's what the goal is. Yeah,
kind of like how most role-playing games have at least an implied flow of play, like early D&D or whatever you want to talk about generally has some sort of like loop of play that's implied. What I've found in Terminal State is you start off downtrodden, you try to get out from under that, and it just gets you in more trouble, and then you're essentially on the run and having to fight back. The corporations that Chris has created are all real jerks. you will hate them. So
some more than others.
Yeah, one of the things that Chris spells out in the Kickstarter, I think it's maybe the first or second sentence in the write-up, is that the hypercorps control literally everything except the way people think at this point, and they're coming for that. So you are the game is basically about trying to make sure that you maintain your independence. And a lot of the times, Chris didn't mention this, but a lot of the times there's a community aspect to it where it's like people are looking up to your characters to try to either serve as an example or literally stop something bad from happening. So I think that's pretty cool. I want to mention there is a free quick start for the game that is linked on the Kickstarter. It gives you a good idea of what the game is about. It has pre-generated characters. It has a little adventure in the back that is actually really cool. And yeah, so if any of this sounds cool to you, but you want to kind of give it a taste, get the quick start off of the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
and that's
quick start only goes to the drive-through, but it's on itch as well. So
that is a 76-page Kickstarter. That's
a quick start. Yeah. The quick start's pretty meaty.
Yeah. You could stop a low small caliber bullet with that. It's not guaranteeing that, folks.
Part of it's my design.
Yeah.
Each character spread is 2 pages. Every chapter, every section has a full page that's just the intro. The name of the chapter with some designy stuff because I can't help myself.
Yeah, graphic design.
It could have been like 50 pages probably easily if I didn't want to design it so much, but.
Yeah, having nice graphic design is a high priority for us. So a lot of time it does swell the page count a little bit.
Yeah,
but what are you gonna do?
Well, as Bat Manuel used to say, it's all about the pose. So I feel you. It's a good looking book. Well, I think we've covered any closing thoughts. You guys want to put out there before we call it a show?
The Kickstarter's got about 12 days to go, and I think we're 72% of the way there right now. So, like you said, we seem to be in the home stretch, but we can certainly use any support and reshares and anything else that anybody wants to do.
And since Paul mentioned support on the final thought category, I consider a vibrant, successful, widespread, tiny little operation, which I believe is the term you two used for your RPG design house. I consider that existing a crucial part of a successful, vibrant, and interesting game industry. So, folks, if you are listening to this, remember that no matter whether or not you are in a position to back, we know not everyone is always in a position to give people money, but just looking and sharing that link on your own social media can be the absolute best thing you can do for someone with a crowdfunding campaign. And that doesn't cost you anything but a little time. And I will right now cut short my effort here to make you do it by enough time that if you go do it, it'll be the same as if I just ranted a little longer. So go, we're saving you the time. Your life will in fact have just as many seconds left to do other stuff. Right now, connecting on social media, marketing is one of the hardest things for small operations to succeed at. Yeah. These guys are two-thirds of the way there. They have a quick start for you. There is no excuse not to boost them and help put another game that, even if you don't like this game, you may like the game that this game inspires in someone else, right? Yeah. So go do it. I'm done.
Thank you, Owen. And we do have other stuff. This is not our first publication. It's our first big one. But yeah, I really appreciate that. It's really hard, especially with algorithms as screwed up as they are right now. It's very, 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 very hard to gain any traction right now. So I really appreciate that.
You know, I found I've been getting a lot of traction. My marketing post the last week, if I include the phrase "eating cats and dogs."
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to be apolitical. Forgive me. So
it's just no. You know,
The thing is, you're not wrong.
No, you're
right?
not wrong.
The thing is that is exactly the sort of thing that can help you get traction. But you know, Mike, you run a game company. I run a game company. Jacob works with all of these game companies I just mentioned. This is hard. And I want people to have a shot and have success. And anyone that has given you a free quick play, they have already proven that they can deliver the goods. So go check it out, play a free game, and in return, throw that link out there so that they can have a shot at reaching another set of eyeballs.
Yeah, please throw on social media, your favorite bus stop, wherever you can get some eyeballs on it. That would be awesome. Yeah, it's gotten harder the last year. Advertising on Facebook is just not doing what it used to do, and Twitter is much less effective than it used to be for spreading the word on things. So it's getting harder out there for a small game company. But Owen, appreciate you giving us the gift of time, like a quirky Englishman with a telephone box. That was very kind of you. So everyone, please go share the URL, tinyurl.com/terminal state. Help get the word out there. Guys, anything else before we wrap it up?
I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Owen, always a pleasure having you on, sir. Thanks for coming on.
you.
Jacob, Paul, Chris, it's been great. We should have you guys back in the future next time you're doing something.
We do stuff. It just takes a couple years for us to get it going. But yeah, we're always making something.
Yeah, hopefully we'll shorten that cycle as we go.
Yeah, I actually have a couple things in the works, but we won't get into that yet. But we're just focusing on this one right now.
Yeah, just we had you on a couple years ago to talk about Grid Shock, which was your apocalyptic superhero setting for icons, and I thought that was just a whole lot of fun. So
thank you.
Find that, I believe, on Drive-Thru RPG.
It's on Drive-Thru and on Itch, and Exalted Funeral, who is the publisher of it these days.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I got stuff on Itch too, because that's where the cool kids are these days, and I am both cool and a kid, so I feel like I should.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah. We're all kids and cool.
Youthful countenance. So all right. Thanks for checking out the Banff podcast. Please check out Terminal State, and we will catch you next time.